Well, we are beginning a 4-part series today as a part of spring cleaning. That's right, it's springtime, and what better time to start cleaning out our spaces physically, mentally, and emotionally. And it starts today with 2 ways to start letting go of possessiveness, and we're going to discover what those are right now. Hi everyone, welcome to the Strength, Yoga, and Freedom Podcast. My name is Justin. I am so glad that you're here. This is the podcast where we use the philosophy of yoga in a practical and everyday way, one small step at a time to become happier people. I have to tell you something. We are going to dive a little bit into some yoga philosophy today. A little deeper than we normally do, but don't worry, I'm still going to give you the practical ways to use yoga philosophy and really exploring how yoga comes full circle. And it's not just going into a studio or being in your living room or going into a gym or a wellness center and doing a bunch of forward folds and touching your toes. That's not what we're going to be talking about. That's not what yoga really is either. It's very multifaceted. We're going to talk about that today, but you can use everything, no matter whether you've never practiced yoga in your life before or whether you have. You can use what I'm teaching you to help yourself grow and become more productive, feel happier, maybe even feel like you have a sense of fulfillment in your life. That's what we're here for. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Don't forget too, you can follow me on Instagram at Justin Ricky Yoga. The link is in the description of this podcast, whether you're listening to it on the podcast, your favorite podcast platform, or whether you're watching or listening to this on YouTube. And you also can sign up for our newsletter. That's also on there and it's free for you. It comes once a week and I give you lots of great tips, little nuggets, and a preview of what's coming up in future episodes. And also in what's going on in the Strength, Yoga, and Freedom community in general. So check those out. They're in the show notes and in the descriptions of the video. So I want to begin this 4-part series right out of the gate by talking about what we do on this podcast, as I just mentioned, and that is linking the practice of yoga really to our everyday life and how we can take small steps, not huge, gigantic, overwhelming mountains we have to climb. We are climbing the mountain, but we're going one step at a time. And these small steps are going to lead to big time happiness, big time fulfillment, and guess what else? Releasing of some stuff. Maybe some things you're carrying around, the baggage you're holding. We're going to move into how we can start to figure out how to release some of this stuff. There are a total of 8 limbs of yoga. Yes, this is where the foundation of yoga is from, these 8 limbs. I like to think of these 8 limbs as not just a checklist or a to-do list of the things that we should just cross off. Okay, I did this limb, I've crossed it off, that's it, right? I don't think of yoga like that. And really, yoga philosophy is not taught that way. You see, they are an endless cycle of growth. And here's the good news. As human beings, you already know, and I already know, all about endless cycles. We already do them. We do that now in habit loops. We focus on things that don't always serve us, and we cycle that crap over and over and over again. Like when you wake up in the morning and you roll out of bed and you roll right out the door to work 3 minutes later, and you haven't even gotten your coffee or you're groggy or you don't even know how the hell you feel, and you do that every day, guess what? You're dealing with a cycle. So you already know what cycles are. Other things that we do to cycle things around are complaining. We beat ourselves up for mistakes. We get resentful. We feel anxiety over things we cannot control. It just goes on and on and on. But we know that when we do these things to ourselves, that they're not always serving us, but they sometimes tend to stay in these loops, these cycles. So why not look at the things we already know we can do instead of the things that seem impossible to do? That's where the little one step at a time comes into play. And that's how I look at the 8 limbs of yoga, looking at the things that we can do instead of the things that seem so impossible. So I look at, I already can cycle my way through 8 limbs of yoga because I already have anxiety cycles, and you probably do too. So let's talk about what the 8 limbs of yoga are. And don't worry, if you are new here, I am not going to teach you all this whole thing about yoga, this big philosophy of yoga. I just want us to look at these 8 limbs as a way for us to remind ourselves to make this a cycle. Something we practice over and over and over again to gain growth and gain understanding of how we live our lives. That is the true practice of yoga. Not just stepping onto a yoga mat in your cute yoga clothes and being able to do a headstand or touch your toes. That's not what yoga is. The limbs allow us to purify the physical body, and they tap into strength. They also allow us to pour energy into our senses to gain mastery over what we are experiencing moment to moment. So here are the 8 limbs of yoga. They are here as follows. Number 1, there are the yamas. These are outward, like the way we treat others. We have the niyamas, which are inward, more like self-discipline. We have the asana. That's the practice of physical poses. That's what you would do if you go to a yoga class. You are practicing asana. There's pranayama, which is breath control. There is pratyahara, which is a sensory awareness, which allows you to draw inward to your own universe. And then there is dhyana, which is a concentration on something, like a focal point. You may also hear this referred to as a drishti, something you're looking at to concentrate, which will help move your mind into a state of, yes, the next limb, meditation. That's the next limb of yoga. And finally, enlightenment, where you really learn to stay in the present moment. Now, to truly understand the whole process, we learn that we can tap big time into progress, both in a spiritual and physical nature. That is where I derive what I teach you in this podcast, the spiritual, physical nature, and making it into progress for your life. So you don't need to be the person who has to go to the yoga studio or the gym or wherever you take yoga classes or in your house. You don't have to be the person who does it every day, 5 times a week, 3 times a week. You just apply these simple practices, principles to your daily life, and suddenly here you are practicing yoga. So we're going to explore a yama today. Now remember, yamas are outward. And the yama we're going to be exploring is aparigraha, which translated means non-possessiveness. This is very important when we're talking about spring cleaning. When we think about possession, we may start to think about greed. Yes, greed actually isn't something we're just born with. You're not just born with, greed in your heart. It's something that society places on us, like thinking you have to have certain things in order to feel happy, like money or fancy houses or fancy cars or the location of where you live, your residence, things in your possession, or even people. Yes, we know we like to have control over what others are doing sometimes, don't we? And we always want to control the outcome because that's our ego talking. That's possession. We want that control. But aparigraha teaches us to think that what we have is already enough. We are enough. We are actually okay. So if you are listening to this podcast in a car and you have a car to drive, you probably are okay. If you have food in your belly, you're probably okay. If you have a roof over your head, you're probably okay. If you have some type of revenue stream that allows you to continue to purchase things so you can live or pay your bills, you're probably okay. Also, if you have some people in your life you can count on when the going gets tough, you're probably okay. But we forget about those things, don't we? Let me give you an example. My video editing software has been crashing so much lately, and it puts me into such a frustrated mood where I feel like so much is going wrong that if I can't get my video editing software to work right, it's going to just be like the end of the world. And so today I completely shut it down and said, that's it. I will come back to it when I'm not frustrated because it's causing me to want to control the outcome of when I finish editing a particular video. So I'm putting all these horrible expectations on myself that I have to control my outcome of this video editing software. Now, the old Justin would sit and go back and forth with the video editing software until it worked, or I would get so frustrated that I would actually stop working on it and I would never return to it because I tend to be someone who will forget that I already have enough. That's just a loop I've created in my mind. I don't think all the time about, okay, yeah, you do have enough. You're okay. I have what I need. It's there. I'll come back to it. And if the video editing software doesn't work in the long run, then we're going to have another solution. It's going to present itself. And I let it go. But the old Justin wouldn't do that. The old Justin would get angry and frustrated and why me and blah, 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 blah. Possessiveness. How do you let go of things? Why don't you ask yourself that question? Well, let's now talk about the two things we need to understand when it comes to possessiveness and aparigraha. Because listen, without these understandings, we can't move forward into the cleaning out of the physical space and the mental space for spring cleaning, which we're going to be talking about in the next several episodes. So let's start with number one, and that is trust your timing. Some people say the timing is everything. That's what you may hear that phrase. I actually didn't believe that for a very, very long time. But let me tell you what, I certainly believe it now. Now, you may ask yourself, or you may be asking me, what does timing have to do with possessiveness? Well, if you grip onto something or someone so hard that you will not let it go, you are forcing your life to take a turn that it was not meant to take. I'm going to repeat that. When you grip onto something or someone so hard that you don't let it go, you are forcing your life to take a turn that it was not meant to take. What you're doing here is grasping onto security to help you feel better rather than allowing timing to take its place. You're tapping in to fear. Let's go to an example. So I lost my very first kitty cat in 2018. His name was Buddy. He was the first pet I ever had. I adopted him in 2003. 2003. He lived to be 15 years old and was probably the one and only constant in my life in my 20s and into my 30s. He was a constant example of how to be chill, how to be caring, yet he also was super no nonsense. Then I adopted your friend, Cody, who many of you know from the YouTube videos that I do, and you see him wander in and out of there. I adopted him in 2005, so a couple years after I adopted Buddy, and Cody is now 18 years old. Now, before Buddy passed away in 2018, I also adopted another cat, coincidentally was named Cat, but with a K instead of a C. And when I think about now, when I now think about it and the adoption with her, I actually had that little gut feeling that I did not want to adopt another cat. And especially her because she was very feral. She wasn't comfortable around people and she was very destructive. But what did I do? I had to cling on to this notion that I'm going to save her, even though it never felt right. It never felt like a good fit. So here I was, 3 cats, and suddenly Buddy dies. And now I'm left with 2, Cat and Cody. Well, it got so bad with Cat that I had to take her to a shelter to be rehomed. It just didn't work anymore. She was dangerous to Cody, who was at that time was going on to being about 17 years old. It was a horrible experience doing that, taking a cat to rehome them. It's almost as bad as putting a cat to sleep because you're losing your pet. And even though she was destructive, it was a horrible experience. I felt angry, I felt guilty, and I felt like I had made this big mistake. So now here I was dealing with this, and it's now just me and Cody. And this is actually when my own healing journey began. This was a few years ago. And I decided I didn't have to get another cat to fill some void that I really didn't have. So I embraced where I was with Cody, and we spent a long time together just being us. And something started to tug at me maybe about 3 months ago that it was time, right? Something wasn't tugging at me before when Kat was around. And even in that long span of time that it was just me and Cody, something was not tugging at me then, but it started to tug a few months ago. And so I decided it was time to adopt again. And I brought sweet, cute little Dylan into my home about a month ago, who is now 5 months old. And let me tell you, Cody and I are so happy with our little boy in the house. The timing was right. Now, had I adopted another cat when I had to give cat away, maybe I would have never been able to find and actually heal with Cody alone for a while. You see, I wasn't ready. But then as time went on and I felt that little tug, I knew it was time. And I'm glad I waited, because if I hadn't waited, maybe I would have never gotten to enjoy my new little bundle of joy, Dylan, who actually reminds me so much of Buddy, who has now been gone for 5 years. So all of that timing worked well with Dylan because I listened to the tug. It's all about timing and listening to that little tug in your soul. Now, you may call that your gut. Oprah Winfrey calls those things whispers. If you ever hear her speak of that stuff, she'll say listen to whispers. Life whispers to you. You know that whisper. You've felt and you've heard the whisper. So are you acting on those tugs, or are you acting on possessiveness and concocting plans to make sure the way you want something to turn out will turn out your way because you're forcing it, just like I did with Kat? Now, when I teach physical yoga, I say the following phrase very often. I say, don't force something. Why would you try and do something physical in your body that hurts or does not feel good? Pushing yourself to do things you actually physically cannot do. But yet we do those things in life often. So that is number one. Thinking about your timing, listening to the tug, the whisper, your gut, whatever you want to call it. That is big time practicing aparigraha. Number two, caring. Wait, what? What do you mean caring, Justin? Are you about to tell us not to care about things? I care. I care about my partner. I want to make sure they're always safe and they're always happy. And I want to put them into a bubble and just make sure they're protected. I care about them. Okay, no, I'm not telling you not to care. But here's the beauty of aparigraha. And I want you to keep in mind what I just said about, I care about my partner, and you can use friend or you can use anybody else, kids. I want to keep them, oh my God, I want to just hold on to okay, I want you to think about that. But here's the beauty of aparigraha, learning to enjoy what is there versus holding onto something that isn't serving us. What does this mean? Here's the example. And this is why I wanted you to remember that whole, like, I have to have control over where my partner is or my kids or whatever. When you don't talk to your spouse, your partner, your kids, your friends, whomever, because you're mad at them for something that you perceive as a problem, then what you're doing is clinging onto a thing instead of looking at what is there in front of you. You are using a mentally abusive trick to try and control a situation instead of actually being present to what is happening so you can learn a lesson. And let me be clear, not talking to someone because you are mad at them is called abuse. It's the silent treatment. That's what that's called. But only communicating in a respectful, non-personal, and professional way to someone who may have hurt you is different. That's growth, because that means you are only giving access to your deeper self to those around you who you know you can trust and who is not causing you physical or emotional harm. So make no mistake, there is a big difference between the silent treatment or not talking to someone because you're angry with them, but you have an intention to be talking to them in the future and have them in your life, versus growing and not giving your energy to those who have mentally or physically abused you. They're very different. When you practice non-attachment, you are tapping into something that is bigger than you. It's moving you back into a sensory experience. Remember how I said that the 8 limbs of yoga go in a cycle? Yes, because you are practicing non-attachment, which is a yama, one of the yamas. You are also tapping into several other limbs of yoga. It would be like think about this, going to a yoga class and holding a chair pose for the whole class. If you don't know what chair pose is, it means you stand straight up and you put your feet together and you sit like you're sitting in a chair. So you squat down and you have to hold and activate all those muscles in your body, which is super physically challenging. Now, would you hold that pose for 60 straight minutes? Of course not. It's mentally overwhelming, and staying in a position like that for too long can be extremely dangerous on your physical body. So what do? You let the pose go and you move on to the next one. Why? Because you actually care. You don't want to hurt yourself. You want to explore other poses. Why don't you do that with other things? You must let go of the actual ownership of something in order to release yourself to the possibilities right fucking in front of you. If you are busy slamming doors and having hissy fits and tantrums and not speaking to people, then you are going to cling to the ownership of the relationship instead of dealing with your emotions and working things through by setting boundaries. That's caring. Dealing with your emotions and working things through by setting boundaries. That's how you care. And I don't want to hear the excuse of, well, I just have a temper. You have a temper because you cannot control yourself. That's why you have a temper. I had a temper. And when I get angry, I can do some very nasty things. And you know what I had to do? Work on that to control the possessiveness, because I do care. And caring is not getting angry and slamming doors and throwing hissy fits. We do have this very, very backwards. We think by caring, we should do everything for everyone else because we feel bad. And you actually don't feel bad. Your behavior is controlling when you feel like you should do things that others are fully capable of doing. What are you teaching someone by doing everything for them? What are you teaching them? That it's okay just to coast. That's what you're teaching them. Guess what? People who coast don't grow. So caring means releasing the attachment in these relationships and letting the bird fly, growing the wings and flying away. This is why death is really hard for us. It's why when your friend moves away, it's hard because you've lost something. You no longer have that relationship. Would you stop your friend from moving away to pursue a dream? Of course you wouldn't. So why on earth do you do this to yourself? By stopping yourself from pursuing a dream because you're gripping onto someone else or something else. So we are going to tap into 3 ways that you can clean things out physically in the next episode. Now that we have the foundation in front of us of a parigraha. Because boy, it is time for some of us to get rid of crap in our houses that we've been storing to take with us to the grave. But guess what? It's not going to the grave with you. So it's time to get this shit cleared out. Now that we know the 2 big things that are going to let us start letting go of possessiveness. And that is trusting the timing and actually tapping into what caring really means. So on the next episode, we get really practical and start talking about how in the hell do I clean out this room that's cluttered and now my kids are moved away, or now my parents don't live here anymore, or now I don't have the roommate anymore, or now the kitchen's disgusting. What do we need to do to get rid of some of this crap? And how do I even get started? Because it's overwhelming. We're going to tackle that in the next episode. Can't wait to see you there. Okay, one last thing. The content in the Strength, Yoga, and Freedom podcast is not intended as a replacement or a substitution for the advice of any medical professional, like a physician, a psychologist, or a qualified therapist, or any other medical professional. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only.